Hi boys and girls, my name is Ashley Gardner and I'm the Director of Children's Ministries at MLEPC. So glad that you are joining us today for Children's Church, and I have some exciting news. Today is the first day since the pandemic started that we are doing Children's Church in person again. So while some of you are listening to this online, so glad you are doing that. Some of you are actually getting to do this in person with me. I actually get to see you face to face, even with masks on, but I get to teach you in person again, and I am so incredibly excited for that. So if you come to church, this is the exact same lesson you're getting, or you can do it at home and listen to it on your computer or your TV. Either way, so incredibly excited that I get to teach you guys. So we have been going back and forth between two different lessons depending on if we were in person or doing worship from home. Even though we weren't doing Children's Church, we were doing a different style of lesson when the church services were going on. We've been doing lessons out of the Jesus Storybook Bible, where we were starting with the creation of the world and going through the stories of the Old Testament, and then we were doing also stories out of the Gospel Project curriculum, and those stories were all about the life of Jesus. That's the stories that we're going to be doing today. We're going to be focusing on Jesus. We've talked about his birth, we talked about his baptism, we talked about his miracles that he did, and recently we have been talking about the lessons that Jesus taught his followers. Now, some of those lessons were a lot easier to follow than others. Last time we did the lesson out of the Gospel Project curriculum, we talked about the Beatitudes. We talked about it was the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus was talking to his followers about what their lives should look like, what their attitude should be towards life, and how they should look different than the rest of the world. We talked about how they were the salt and the light of the earth. Today our lesson is a really difficult one to follow. Sometimes lessons are hard. Sometimes there's things that Jesus says that are really hard for us to hear, and sometimes there are things we don't want to hear. In today's world, oftentimes if there are hard lessons, if there's things that are going to make people angry, we choose not to say them. We want to be liked. We would love to have a crowd follow us. We would love to have as many friends as possible. We would love to be famous and popular. But Jesus wasn't like that. Jesus, instead of having huge crowds follow him, wanted faithful followers. He wanted people that weren't going to get scared and abandon him, or weren't going to decide, you know what, this really isn't for me. So Jesus was honest with them about what it was going to mean to follow him. And like I said, he was going to tell them things that a lot of people wouldn't want to hear. And I think a lot of us, if we wanted people to follow us and we knew that some of these things were coming, we might just keep our mouths shut because we wouldn't want crowds or friends to leave us. But Jesus was different. Jesus, when he saw the crowds, knew that a lot of people were following him because of the miracles, because of the things that he had done. And Jesus wanted people that didn't just want to see miracles, but truly loved God and believed in Jesus, that we're going to follow Jesus at all costs. So we're going to listen to this teaching today that, like I said, is a really hard one. And there's some things I want you to listen for. He talks about someone going off to war. If someone was going to fight a war and they're soldiers, I want you to listen for that piece. Also, if someone were going to be building a tall tower, he talks about that. He also talks about birds and foxes. What tough lesson was Jesus teaching involving soldiers, foxes, birds, and towers? You're gonna have to listen and find out. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we're gonna talk about it when you get back. Enjoy.
Hey friends, it's me, Megan, and I'm Jessie. Jessie, how was your class at church this morning?
Oh, it was so fun, Megan. We learned from the Bible and we played Follow the Leader.
Oh, that is a fun game. Did you get a turn at being the leader?
Oh yeah, I marched and clapped and waved my arms and patted my tummy, and everyone had to do what I was doing because I was the leader.
Wow, did you do all that at one time? That sounds really hard.
Oh no, I did one thing at a time.
Okay, good. In today's Bible story, Jesus talked about what it is like to follow him.
Oh, cool. So, when we follow Jesus, we do what he does?
Yep, and it's not always easy, but it is always worth it. Listen to the story. Many people wanted to follow Jesus. Large crowds followed him around. One man said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus told the man, "Foxes have dens, and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lie down." Another disciple said, "Lord, I will follow you, but first let me go and bury my father." Jesus replied, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." Jesus told the crowds that following him would not be easy. "Anyone who comes to me must be willing to leave everything," he said. "You must love me most of all, more than your own life. Anyone who thinks life should be easy cannot follow me," Jesus said. Jesus wanted the people to choose carefully. He told them a story. If you wanted to build a tower, you would first sit down and see what you would need to make the tower. If you did not, you would build the foundation and could not finish. People would laugh at you. Then he told them another story. If you were a king, you would not go to war against another king without thinking about if your army is great enough to win the war. If you don't have enough men to fight, you would send some men to ask for peace before the fighting even started. Jesus wanted people to think about the cost. If you are not willing to give up everything you have, you cannot follow me, Jesus said. Whoever gives up his life for me will find true life. What good is it to have everything you want in the world if you give up life with God forever? Following Jesus is not easy, but he is worth it. When we trust in Jesus, we give him complete control of our lives. Jesus gave up his own life to rescue people from sin and give us life with God forever.
Welcome back. So that was a really hard lesson to hear. I think that most of us would have wanted to tell people that. What was Jesus talking about? He talked about the cost of following him, what it was going to take. Oftentimes when we think of cost, we think of money. This is my son's piggy bank, and he has taken a lot of money, I think, from his mom and dad. So I will show you his little piggy bank here. So this is Nathaniel's piggy bank and all of his money in it. Now, if I told him that he could get a toy and it was only gonna cost him a few nickels or dimes or pennies, I think he would be very fine with paying that cost. But if I told him there was something that he wanted that was going to cost him every single thing in this piggy bank, if it was a high cost, I think Nathaniel would really have to think about it and decide if that was what he wanted. That's what Jesus was doing for his followers. He was telling his followers, not in money, but in their lives, that following him had a very high cost, that it wasn't just a few dimes, it wasn't a few dollars, it wasn't a couple Sundays a month going to church. Jesus was telling them that it was going to cost them their entire lives. That if they were going to truly follow Jesus, that Jesus needed to be the most important thing. Jesus wasn't saying that they could have everything they wanted in life, that they could have this perfectly wonderful life and then add Jesus somewhere in the mix of it. Jesus was saying that if people were going to follow him, that their whole lives needed to be about Jesus, every single thing. And he was saying to them that before they start following him, they needed to count that cost. That's where Jesus was talking about the soldiers and the building blocks. He was saying that if somebody is going to go and build a tower, first, they're going to make sure they have all the supplies they need. They're not going to start a project and not be able to finish it. He's saying that before you start following Jesus, know what that's going to look like. Know that your life then belongs to Jesus, and he is the most important, more than any other thing. Jesus was saying about someone going off to war. They're going to look and make sure that they have enough soldiers, enough people to fight, enough resources to defeat the enemy. Before they're going to go off and fight, they have to make sure they're ready for it. And remember, with the birds and the foxes, it talked about how the Son of Man doesn't even have a place to lay his head. Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but even Jesus doesn't have a place that he can kind of call his own. That as Christians, we're supposed to be following wherever Jesus goes, that we can't get comfortable where we are. We need to be following him. That is really, really hard. I think as an adult, it's actually even harder than what it is for you guys. But what I would say that it would mean for you guys is, perfect example is sports. There are so many sporting events that happen on Sundays now. Maybe not during COVID, but before that, I know that there were so many different games that would take place on Sundays, and that's been that way. It's gotten worse since I've become an adult, but when I was a kid, that was the case too. And I know that my parents and myself had to go head to head with our coaches to basically say that we thought on Sunday mornings that God was more important than a sporting event. We would have our coaches tell my parents that I was a swimmer at the time, that I wasn't allowed to swim if I didn't swim on a Saturday and a Sunday. They really wanted me to miss Sunday church. And my parents said that no, God is more important, that if there's ever something going on at church, that was what was priority. They risked having me not compete. They risked that because they knew that Christ was more. My coach did let me swim. He did allow me, but it was a hard decision. And I'm so glad they did that, because as a kid, I learned that Jesus was more important. There was nothing that we would miss church for unless we were deathly ill. If we had stayed up late the night before, if it was a busy weekend, if I had a lot of schoolwork, if there was a sporting event, nothing was more important than Jesus. Jesus came first. And I have to say, growing up, that was such an important thing for me to learn as a little kid, because I still believe that Jesus is the most important thing. But my parents, as a little kid, were teaching me to count the cost. They were teaching me that Jesus comes first. I know a lot of these decisions fall on your parents. It's not on you. But I want you to see, if there's stuff going on, if there's stuff in your life that's coming before Jesus, that's one of those costs. Are you putting him first? Is he the absolute center of your life above everything else? Because I'm telling you, it's a high, high cost to follow him. But he wants everything. He wants our entire lives to be about him. He doesn't want to just be an afterthought. He wants to be our main focus. Not just now as kids, but also as adults. He wants everything. And I think it's a pretty sweet deal that if we live our lives for Jesus, we get everything in return. We get to live eternally with him in heaven. We get Jesus. It's the greatest thing of all. But Jesus wants all of us. So are you ready to pay the price? Is the cost too great for you? I want you guys to to know it going into it. Sometimes following Jesus is not easy. Sometimes he's going to call you to do things that the rest of the world thinks is crazy. But Jesus is always the most important, and what Jesus calls us to do is always the best. So I would think about in your lives, are you following Jesus most and more than anything else? Is he number one in your life? And if not, what is number one? What's most important to you? And is that the way you want to keep it? Know that Jesus is worth it. If you have to give up everything for him, if it's every single cent of your piggy bank, if it's every single second of your life, if it's every single thing you own, Jesus is always best. He's always most important. It's a high cost, but think of the cost that Jesus paid for you. Think of what the price was for you. He gave his entire life. He actually died for you. Jesus isn't asking us to go and die, most likely, but he's asking us to live for him, to live every second of every day for him, to tell others about him, to spend time with him by reading his Bible and by praying. He wants us. He wants all of us, and he is so worth it. I know that was a really tough message today, but I hope you guys are able to learn from it. I hope that you choose to follow Jesus no matter what the cost, whatever it takes. He's worth the price that needs to be paid. And I'm telling you, whatever it is, he's paid more for you, and it's worth it. I love you guys. I hope to be teaching a lot of you in person this lesson. If not, I hope to be seeing you guys soon. I miss you, and have a wonderful day, and God bless. Thanks.